for this particular race in terms of Kibra or not. But it seems like even as we wait for this, he's really not out of the woods with this particular case, because even after the IEBC gives their verdict on this particular one, there's also a petition that might go to court concerning his age. Yes. Because they're saying in terms of what they're looking at right now, there's a lady, Conchella, saying that there's a big discrepancy right there. Talks about integrity issues as far as his age is concerned.
Absolutely.
Mark, let me bring you into this. Because if we go to this direction in terms of the age, not only are we talking about Kibra in terms of him and his candidature there, but his whole, soccer career, his sporting career now is brought into the spotlight because of this one decision.
Yeah, well, the guy is clearly not the brightest pea in the pod, but no, because if you know you've got certain skeletons in your closet, you need to wade into politics very carefully, because any strategist will tell you that the moment Mr. Mulwa here decides to run, we will analyze his hair, his tie, his nails, to try and find out how to bring him down. Now, Mariga has had these stories about his age since he first joined football, okay? So you've had these queries, then you decide that you're also going to somehow make a very interesting voters card. So let's look at a number of things. Number one, we are talking about potentially choosing a leader who's never voted.
Yes.
So when he goes to a polling booth, he does not know what to do. Then we expect that somehow he will know what to do when he gets to parliament. That is tragedy number one. Number two, if he has falsified government documents, okay, that's akin to failing a blood test. You understand? Because how do you falsify your age? You understand? You can write you're 16, you're whatever, but the truth of the matter is you're the age you are. You will die when you'll die. So this is an issue, one, of political competence and his lack thereof, because for me, I cannot vote for someone who's never voted. Then on the other side is the issue of his integrity as a person, and chapter 6 then comes into mind. You must ask yourself a question. If someone is willing to lie on an official government document, what won't he lie about? That's the question. And the people of Kibra need to be very careful, and people of Kenya need to be very careful about how we select such people. Because today, if you found out that I have falsified my name, I'm not really Mark Bichachi, I'm called Peter Rapundo, right? Which of you will ever trust me back here? You won't.
It's a key issue.
Yes, and that's just an issue of name. So whenever someone alters their identity, you need to be very, very worried.
Nerima, I'll bring you into this as well, because not only are we talking about Mariga, we're also talking about the law, because it came to a point where it seemed like the law didn't speak to this particular scenario. After the seat is declared vacant, of course, no one is supposed to register in this particular constituency. Probably somebody saw that as loophole and had him, registered in another constituency. Should you go back to the law and look at the Elections Act again, so that in future we don't have the same scenario where you want to vie for a particular seat, but clearly all of these spaces that we don't know how to address according to the law?
It's not only the law. There are also some processes that he skipped in terms of being invited by the IBC when they met with the candidates for Kibra, and Jubilee sent nobody. And so that also shows a sense of impunity. And when we even look at the law, I think the law is very clear. What we do is end up going above and beyond the law, because it's not just Mariga. It's just that we're focusing on him right now. There are particular political leaders at the moment where we can't quite verify even their certifications, whether they even completed school. And that's something, they are still leading, and they won their electoral seats. So the concerns that I'm seeing is the fact that some individuals get to bypass the law. The law is clear, but then I think that when it comes to us following the law, it's unfair that there are some people who are above that law. And just because you're famous doesn't mean that you should be above that law.
And like how you brought in that famous Kenyan proverb, the law is very clear. It's very clear.
Yes, it is.
Ben, is Mariga a victim in all of this? Is he a pawn of players larger than him, it seems?
No, he is not. You see, like the same way he made a decision to join his football career, is the same way you make critical decisions about any engagement or any pursuit in life. And two things come out very prominently for me. First, it is turning out that for the first time, Kibra had a really competent leader in the late Ken Okoth. And he really set the bar extremely high. Now the people of Kibra are being treated to tragic comedy. by the caliber of individuals that are being dragged into the race. In fact, I was reading some on social media platforms that after Wiper initially intended to have Prezo running,
Right.
I heard there was also Kanu wanted to run, and Onini and many others. You know, it's really a tragic comedy, because we have reached a point whereby even the key political parties in this country are not paying attention to quality and the kind of content they wish to associate themselves with. And this also brings me to the second issue. As I mentioned before, the entire tragedy that Mariga is facing excuse me, finds its, the buck stops at the deputy president's door. And I mentioned here a few weeks ago, and people took problem with that. The deputy president has got zero foothold in Nairobi politics. So he was misled even into handpicking a candidate who did not exist in the political radar in this country, and they have been pushing on that. Eventually, the character was registered 16 days after the seat was declared vacant in a different constituency even. I mean, he could have even bothered to go to Olympic primary to register if he intended to register. So it is all through a tragedy. And actually, in my view, it is disrespectful to the people of Kibra.
But
who
let me
really
jump on that as
deserve
well, because when
yes.
you say the deputy president doesn't have footing in terms of Nairobi politics, when you look at the party that he's running, and of course the constituency that they have in Nairobi.
Jubilee does not exist. What we have critical factions. There is Kieleweke, there is Tanga and many other
And Nairobi's lieutenants are in Nairobi, no foot soldiers.
No,
the deputy president.
The deputy president has no foot soldiers in Nairobi. That's a reality.
Right.
We have to put it to him as it is, so that he knows what needs to be done. Because he may have a few characters who go for small handouts at his office, but he has no foothold and he has no understanding of Nairobi politics. Nairobi is very complex. I've been involved in Nairobi politics. It is not, you know, in the villages, you excite people, just drive in and contribute 5,000 bob in the church, and suddenly everybody calls you Mheshimiwa. It doesn't work in Nairobi. So it's really unfortunate. Again, it also brings out a very sad aspect about Mariga. Now that it's coming out that even he's lied about his age and all that, does that mean that he's a celebrated footballer that who built his career on fraudulence? I mean, for what gain?
Right.
Yeah, it really doesn't add any value to anybody.
So even the credibility that he had is now being brought to question.
It is all round unfortunate, actually. And I wish if there was a way the IEBC could call off all the shenanigans that we've been treated to so far, so that again the process can be started afresh, so that credible fellows perhaps can present themselves for Kibra.
Okay, and of course, even as you talk about that, let's stick to
actually that
matters
brings
politics.
us to the issue. You've seen even Raila is quarreling his party because
On the
they also
registry of
bungled
voters.
the nominations. Now they ended up with a candidate who was not the preferred choice by the people. So in essence, and this is going to be very interesting, mark you, what is going to play out in Kibra? Jubilee and ODM and all these major parties, even ANC, are going to lose. This seat will go by somebody who is currently not even in the entire framework.
So you're saying an independent is not going to get the seat?
Not necessarily an independent, but they are going to pull out actually what happened in Ugenya. Watch this space, actually.
Right. None of the big players will get the seat?
None of them will get it.
Well, fortunately, November the 7th
the
will come.
people, you know, can really set the standard very nice for them. So they know what they're looking for.
Right.
None of these parties are going to win that seat.
Okay, we'll wait and see how that one plays out as far as that's concerned. But let's still stick to politics, and this time bring in the church as well. We saw the ugly scenes that played out, had Dindi Nyoro arrested for the melee that happened in the church. Nanyuki comes around this past weekend, and of course, typical to form, nominated Member of Parliament, Minor Commander, was at the church, and even as he gave his address to the people there, the women's rep in the area, Laikipia, women's rep Catherine Waruguru, wasn't allowed into the church, as the story goes at this particular point in time. So she went and had her own small, brought her people together and spoke about this infringement that she felt. How do you separate this thing once and for all? Because every congregant says we're tired of having these politicians in our church, but it's the same church as every Sunday that you'll have an MP at the pulpit, Mark.
You know, let me tell you, these political games need to stop, because we need to define what first a demonstration is. Having 6 people holding placards would not pass for a demonstration in Nairobi or in Kisumu. It is only in certain places where on purpose we are trying to show that Mount Kenya is divided. That's really what the message
But
is.
Mark, is it not?
No, just wait. Just let me finish my line of thought. There's someone who's extremely desperate to show that Mount Kenya is divided.
Right.
There's someone who's extremely desperate to show that the mountain has caught a stomachache. Now, let's look at it critically. There's Kieleweke and Tangatanga in Mount Kenya.
Right.
Are the people Kieleweke? Are the people Tangatanga? The truth is, no. Their leaders are. The leaders in Central have decided to make Kieleweke and Tangatanga an issue. Fine. Let us then look at what is the issue. Is the issue roads being built for Central Kenyans? No.
No.
Is the issue dealing with poverty in Central Kenya? No. Is it dealing with cohesion in the community? No. What is the issue? Who will be kingpin and who will be president in 2022? Therefore, if your hair follicle is the one that has a headache, does your entire head have a headache? The truth is no. You see, if these guys were talking about critical issues, when people demonstrate in Nyanza, they're talking about electoral justice. That makes sense. When people demonstrate, even in Nairobi, they're talking about reduced tariffs. That makes sense. These central demonstrations are air. It is nothing.
But Mark,
now
again,
we want to raise the ghost of Matiba over a guy's specialty to raid churches.
But Mark, again, I ask, the issue of the region as a whole, is it intact?
That's what I'm getting to.
Please do.
Now, listen. The truth is, perception informs reality in politics. So the perception that is being created now of a divided Mount Kenya will soon become a reality if we continue entertaining this kind of nonsense. If we keep saying that now you are like Matiba because you stormed a church. The purpose for you storming the church did not put a single shilling, a single kilometer of road for the people of Central Kenya.
Right.
And you want to be like Kibaki. Next, other people will say, I am like Jomo Kenyatta because I set a corrupt person free from prison. That is the problem of what is happening in Mount Kenya. And if they do not return to principle and return to sanity, let me tell you the truth, that region will be in trouble for a very long time.
Nerima Mark is saying that this is still perception, and in time, it will become the reality that we see. But between now and then, either way we look at it, the whole issue of, and it's been an issue that has been spoken about for a long time, if you go for a political rally, you'll never see a pastor being called to the stage to address the people there. Why is it when you go to church on Sunday, I'm waiting for my pastor, but Mheshimiwa Mulwa comes to the pulpit?
Yes.
How do we deal with this one? Because after what happened in Muranga, the area archdiocese said that no more politicians in the church. Let's just people come there, they can get their sermon, and then the rallies can be done later. Should you just have that as a blanket rule across the country once and for all?
That's what I said. Last time we were here, I was like, I wish we were just like Namibia, where we were not allowed to talk
Put
about...
it into law.
Yeah, not even put it into law. Like, the churches just need to take a stance and say no politicians. Because I find it amusing when Gujiri says that she wasn't allowed to speak because she wasn't invited and she came with 200 drunk people. But isn't the church the place where everyone is invited? I mean,
Right.
aren't you supposed to be able to walk into the church even though you're drunk? That's the only place.
Right.
I thought that's what salvation was about. But
Salvation is for kosher people. But you said something funny, that the church should take a stand. How? Does it have legs?
Have they lost
Yes.
that's
That's what I
ground?
mean.
yes, yes. They don't have.
They
Once-
don't have legs to stand on. Yeah.
They've lost
Right.
their sense. They have.
Mulwa, for most countries and most societies, we look at the church for guidance. But every time we're looking at the church, instead of seeing a pastor there, we're more and more finding politicians there.
Absolutely, because as I indicated here a few days ago, you realize the church in this country particularly has completely lost the moral standing that Kenyans or any individual would look up to a spiritual organization. We no longer have the church we used to have in the 90s in the clamor for multi-party democracy. We no longer have Christian leaders, the likes of Alexander Muge or Bishop Ndingi and those kinds of individuals. What we have today are traders. That's why even most of these churches today have gone full throttle into business. They are building academies and they are building high-rise buildings even in the CBD, destroying proper architectural structures, because what they are keen on is how much money they are raising. And you'll be surprised because, and I think people also need to rethink the concept of the church. Because when your pastor wants money, he comes to you, but when you look for money, he tells you to turn to God. Why does he also turn to God to get that money? That's, you know, we critically need to begin to interrogate this kind of things that we imported into this country without thinking. But it's really unfortunate to see what is playing out, because when the church loses standing whereby it can be the axis of morality in a society, then anything goes. There's no difference between what we are seeing within most of the preachers and what our politicians are treating us to. So in the long run, it is really becoming untidy. Right. And especially also politicians to begin to exploit that. Why, as you asked actually, why can't these politicians just organize their own rally, even in a separate compound? Then if they want bishops and pastors to come and pray or preach, or they can invite them there. But there are people who specifically want to go to church because they want spiritual nourishment. So when you start treating them to these theatrics, it is really unfortunate.
Right. Yes. And of course, that's a story that is also being followed as to see what will happen next to this perception issue as far as the central region is concerned. But let's stick to religion for now, because last week, court decision, of course, on Rastafarianism. Now religion, you can have your dreadlocks and go into any premises as long as you subscribe to that particular faith. But this decision also being taken different ways. Now we have Muslims who've expressed their anger and accused the judiciary of bias by barring Muslim girls from wearing hijab in non-Muslim schools, but allowing Rastafarian students to keep their dreadlocks in learning institutions. Mr. Mark, let me start with you on this one as well. With this particular one, should we have a again, is it going back to the law where, okay, fine, what does religion prescribe? You're supposed to have a turban, it's fine, have a turban. If it's dreadlocks, go with your dreadlocks. Whatever it is, as long as it's, you know, prescribed by religion, feel free to have that in your institution.
Why do we have uniforms in schools?
To keep things uniform.
No, to keep us colonized. That was the whole idea. You see, the idea of a uniform is if you make people look the same, eat the same, and do what you want, you turn them into sheep. Okay? And that's the biggest issue. Because you kill the individuality of students, you kill the individuality of a person, and even worse, you kill the creativity in that particular individual. And I remember even for us when we were in school, if the uniform was dark gray, you tried to get as close to light gray as possible so that you could stand out. And uniforms go against human nature. We are not uniform at all. The reason why this show works is Nerima is different from me, and so is Ben different from Nerima. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do. Number two, in this country, uniforms are an impediment to schooling. I just came back from Baringo. As you know, I donate there every 2 months. So I just came back yesterday. The 4 kids I'm sponsoring can't go to school because they don't have uniform. Now, what kind of reason is that? And so we need to really talk about the bigger issue. Who cares if you're wearing a turban? Who cares if you have dreadlocks? Who cares if you are wearing whatever it is, if you got dyed hair? As in, at the end of the day, how much will your dreadlocks affect your grades? You understand? And this idea that there needs to be uniformity among kids is nonsensical. Because even if the uniform is the same, I remember we had blazers in school. All the rich kids had proper blazers, you know, with inside pockets and stuff like that. The rest of us had those blazers that are made from shirt material, you know. So there's always that difference, because even, you remember when you had an Oxford mathematical set, and then if you had, what was that thing called?
There was another one, Koffer.
Koffer, yes. If you had a Koffer one.
Right.
And we had uniforms. And if you had a youth pen or a hero pen. So seriously, Kenya has this idea of measuring on minors. It should not matter at all whether kids have dreadlocks, whether they are able to put on a hijab or not. Because if Nerima is in a hijab, how does it affect the quality of my tea?
Right. Yes.
You know,
and it became a really big issue, the whole dreadlock affair that had to go to the courts as well. Let me just get to Nerima, then I'll come to you as well, because I can see you thought about the Koffer. And it's brought back memories, Mr. Mula. We'll come to you on that.
The youth pen.
And the youth pen. But of course, as we said, were we just blowing hot air? And was this a really small thing that had to go to the courts to be decided over? What's on your head, dreadlocks or not?
I don't, it's okay, so we make it a big deal. I agree with Mark on that, especially even when you think about some schools entering Form 1, how girls have to shave their hair.
Right. Yes.
And that is a big deal. It's a big deal. And I do believe that constitutionally, religion, you're allowed to practice whatever religion you want. And if it is involved with your attire, that's fine. It's supposed to allow you to be free, and that's what the Constitution permits us to do. Because now you're stepping on people's rights because they're not harming anyone. So I believe that you should be able to be free to be able to express yourself. And it doesn't matter in terms of whether you have dreadlocks or hijab. I do think it's quite unfair that they're not allowed to wear hijab to school.
Right, right. So they should really go back to the courts and just have this, because this went to the courts, and as of now, as a girl going to a non-Muslim school, you're not allowed to have a hijab walking in.
First, before we delve into that, I would wish to know whether this court decision to allow dreadlocks in classrooms was inspired by the recent visit by the president to Jamaica.
It might have been informed by that.
It might have some basis on that. If that is the case, then he needs also to visit the Muslim countries. Then maybe we can, then we can have that also coming along.
Right.
But actually, as Mark puts it, and I want to also agree with Nerima, we really have a tragic way of looking at education, particularly in this country, and the way education has been nurtured across the African continent. The primary objective of education is to be able to nurture free will and free thinking. That is not the case. What we have around here is a case whereby we have tried to box and sandpaper everybody to fit into a particular narrative or way of doing things that is entirely limiting, that curtails freedom of thinking and ultimately kills creativity. Because if you analyze, I want to take you through something that I read some time back that was very interesting. Mark, you'll be shocked that for the last 100 years, even the designs of houses have changed. The designs of cars have changed in the last 100 years. The designs of aeroplanes have changed in the last 100 years. The designs of even clothing has changed in the last 100 years. But the classroom has remained the same structure. Why is that? We are insisting on sitting in a classroom that looks exactly as it did in 1704. There can never be any growth in that kind of a setup. And that's why you find even locally here, there are many people who are investing in the British curriculum and the American curriculum and many others. I'll also, when you find time, also look through the Japanese education system, whereby kids up to 8 years old learn nothing but manners and etiquette and behavior. They are never taught these funny things. Now, last night you saw one of the stations airing a documentary about kids who are waking up at 4 a.m. to go to school, carrying big books, 6-year-olds. You can't achieve anything through that kind of a structure. So it's unfortunate that the policy makers are so much focused on nothingness, like this CBC. Let's look at the creativity in terms of these kids. Let's look at what we can be able to enable. Let's create an enabling environment.
It's good to bring up the CBC because the grade 3 assessment starting today.
Can you imagine?
Lots of questions had a reason on that, but they've said it's a continuous process. Actually, for the entire term.
That was very well captured in caricature I saw last week, whereby what Magoha has done is get a boda rider from Moy Avenue, take him to JKI and tell him, you know what, you are going to fly this Boeing to New York. That's exactly what CBC is doing in this country.
So there
has not been any capacity building for the teachers. I mean, look at the confusion. Even the teachers, some of them even don't understand what needs to be happening. Then there's such a discrepancy between what is happening within certain schools, especially in urban areas, and what is happening in the villages. Now even some parents in the rural areas are being tormented to start taking pictures and videos of kids. You saw others walking around streets wearing sackcloths like they are mourning. in the spirit
Mark, I'll bring you in on this as well, because
there's
something I need to bring you on CBC as well.
No, not even on CBC. I just want to look at basic education.
It's a tragedy.
When you take someone to school, you train them for life, correct?
Yes.
So everything you do in school should prepare them for their career. Now, when a child is going to school at 4, 5, and you know when you're coming to this show, you'll find school kids standing on the side of the road, coming to... Now, my question is, what career is this you're preparing them for? Are they going to be watchmen? Because those are the only people who need to be up at 4.
That hour.
So we do things in the classroom that don't happen in real life. So you have a kid in uniform. So you're preparing them to a world where everyone dresses the same. What exactly are you trying to prepare them for? And that brings you back down to the CBC. The CBC is a good idea.
Yes,
Everyone
it is.
agrees.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Everyone
it is.
agrees. Even if you ask Sosion today, he'll tell you it's a good idea. But the problem with it is this, and this is what our government needs to look at and look at carefully. Just the same way I told them that adding tax on burgers is not going to stop Kenyans from eating burgers, forcing Kenyans to do things also is not going to bode well for this country. They need to sit down with teachers, they need to sit down with Kuppet, they need to sit down with all these stakeholders and give them some leeway.
Okay. Mr. Mark, we'll have to leave it at that because we're moving into our summary right now.
You cannot say that a teacher without a master's program can't be a school principal. Is there a course called school principal masters? What is...
Okay, very many issues, of course, that have to be looked into as well, and that's an issue that Kuppet has raised with the ministry. Yes. We're following that very keenly. But as we wind up, we have to have a good, bad, or ugly for the weekend as we get into the week. We'll start with the lady, of course, the only lady, of course, on the panel, Nerima Wako. Your good, bad, or ugly?
I would say the fact that there's a grade 3 starting something and teachers don't even know what the assessment looks like is worrying. And the teachers are busy arguing, forming new unions with private schools, bank accounts are shut down. It's a hot mess. So it's ugly.
Right, for you it's an ugly this morning. For you, Mr. Mulwa?
For me, I'll do the 3 quickly.
Very quickly.
Yes, my good was the apology by Ramaphosa during the burial of Mugabe. That was really something because as Africans, we have really degenerated. My bad was the suicide that was committed by this young girl from Bureti. I mean, it is really tragic, especially teachers who are shaming kids in that. My ugliest is that video we saw yesterday from that kid from Consolata School. I mean, as parents, we are completely failing. We are investing too much on sideshows in the pizzas that are being banned here without focusing on really nurturing this generation. That was really untidy.
Right, quite a shocking video that, and every person who watched it wondered what's really going on in the education system. Mr. Bichachi, your good, bad, or ugly?
IBC did its job, okay? Thankfully, there is no reggae. Reggae has been stopped. Football
we're in the verdicts
stopped. The IBC did its part, so the other part, that's good. The bad for me was finding out that Cohen was murdered. That was really, really bad. But the ugliest for me is what was the bad for him. The fact that a young lady lost her life because of the ignorance of the male human in this country. That's what hurts me the most, because there are so many men who are watching me who can't even go buy pads for their wife, their sister, or their daughter. Shame on you.
Very true. And we leave at that particular point. Thank you so much for that. Mark Bichachi, thank you for your time. Nerima Wako, Ben Mulwa. That, of course, has been your news super review this morning, right?